Hello everyone, once again another deck profile for set 6 of Divines, this time on the main cover card update for Chronojet Dragon. Never did a deck profile on this because released and Stride deck set really wasn't much to change, and even then pretty much everyone's deck is the same, but now with Chronos Command out, the decks kind of diverge a bit, so here's my take on it. And I have to say, I do like the new support, and it was a very surprising addition too. I was not expecting Chronos Command to finally return, especially with the 10th anniversary of G. Very fitting as well, since they brought back Chronos Command with it, and it's just cool to see Stride deck set support because we barely ever got direct Stride deck set support, and this is the first time we actually got direct Stride deck set support with new Strides. And I am glad to see more Strides, which actually gives me hope for the future of the other Stride deck sets, and also possibly future support of Stride deck sets as well. So overall, I'm just very happy to just see the new support. But anyway, how the deck runs? It actually runs very similar to back how Gear Chronicle ran, rewinding your opponent's rearguards and also the pseudo time leap on your rearguards, which is actually a cool little mechanic I really like because it's just playing around with your rearguards and I just find it really cool. And time dragons are awesome. But on that, there's really not much to say, so let's just begin with the deck profile with, of course, the Ride deck. So because this is a Stride deck set, we must run these specific Ride line cards. So first off, the Chronojet, which of course we go to the grade 1 Mazer Gear Dragon, which searches out your crest, and it's mandatory because the crest is what enables you to stride. And also before we continue with the ride line, just like every other crest, for each face-up G units in your G zone, your whole front row gets was 10k power because the deck does not have Persona Ride, so I kind of get why. With the other part where your main grade 3 Vanguard is going to be 13k base because of course it's being a copy and paste of the original, being 11k, but also all the crests will have its own final unique ability where in this case is that in the beginning of battle, your grade 3 units can become grade 0, which is very important because of time leap reasons. So of course it's just helpful for the deck, but you just need to run it because it's for the deck. In which we continue off to the grade 2 Smoke Gear Dragon, where when your Chronojet rides on top of it, you can Soul Blast 1 to search your deck for a grade 3. This is just going to enable you to basically perform your stride, in which we go to the grade 3 Chronojet Dragon himself. So first off, 11k base, but thanks to your crest, 13k base. Has the stride skill, just like back in the day, where when you stride on top of it, when you stride on top of it, you can Counter Blast 1 to choose one of your opponent's rearguards and rewind it to the bottom of the deck, which is just another way of removal if you need it, but putting it to the bottom of the deck can suck sometimes depending on the matchup, in particular the Superior Call from deck matchups, so keep that one in mind. But it also has a Generation Break 2 ability, aka if you use 2 G cards from the G zone, so when this card attacked, it gets plus 5k power, and also guard restrict on grade 1s and higher, aka PGs and anything above it. Which in D format is of course very strong because there's a lot more sentinel restriction than grade 1s and higher, so just being able to block all that is just strong. But yeah, there's really not much to say because everything revolves around with the strides, because it's a Stride deck set. In which that's it for the Ride deck lineup. Now for the main deck, so of course, starting off with the grade 3s. 3 more Chronojet Dragons. I see many people run 2, but I like 3 just to maximize my finisher stride, aka the Chrono Dragon next stage. So I just run 3 just to maximize my chances for it. And then to the Stride Order card, the Passage of Time. Just like all the Stride Order cards, you basically turn your Stride skill or your Stride unit costs for free of 1 Counterblast if you use it for stride, so that's a nice part. But the other nice part is that you can use this if you went first, because you play by counterblasting 1 while you have a Chronojet Dragon crest, and then to the end of turn, you can use the Generation Break abilities without any restriction. Because if you guys don't remember, the ruling is that if you were at grade 3 from the previous turn, while your opponent's at grade 2, or both players are at grade 3. So you went first, you cannot do a stride during that first grade 3 ride. That's why this part is kind of important because it unrestricts all your Generation Break abilities, which basically most of your cards are going to be restricted to the Generation Break abilities. But not only that, you can choose a card from your Soul or Rearguard and put it to the bottom deck, and then Superior Call a unit with 1 grade higher than that and of course shuffle your deck. So you get that 1 pseudo time leap, which is actually very helpful because you can always go from grade 1 and then choose a specific grade 2 that you want. Most of the time it's just just a little gimmick of the deck where you just grade up a bit. Most of the time, it's actually the deck's playstyle where you just want a superior call the higher grade, especially for more attackers. So it's a good 2-up if you need it, but mainly if you went first, but you can also use it as stride cost, which is also very nice. And then I run the Stride generics, where if placed on Rearguard or Guardian, reveal one grade 4 from your hand, or if your Vanguard is grade 4, you perform one of the following. So it could either become a 15k shield, or counterblast 1 to draw a card and then choose 2 cards from your draw zone and put it to the soul, which is of course very helpful because the deck does use a bit of soul. But also, if this card is used as Stride or discarded for a grade 3 of the Ride deck, you also draw a card. Both very helpful. Not going to use the 15k shield part, but you are going to use it for the extra soul. But sometimes you do run out of counterblast, so you might not really use that part of the skill. So I am thinking about cutting this down to 3, but because of the stride part, I still like it at 4. And then some one of grade 3s because of Chronos command. So the Balif, where of course you use that stride, you draw a card, but also plus 10k on attack on a generation break 2. And the other alternate option because of Chronos command is the over trigger grade 3, where if your opponent drive checks a trigger plus 10k power and 10k shield, and then when this card attacks while not being boosted, choose a rearguard in the same column and put it as soul, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it, or you can remove an over trigger and then gets the guard restrict ability on your opponent's grade 1s and higher. So both are pretty cool option, especially since these two don't use counterblast, hence why I like to keep these as one of each, and it just depends on scenario on which one I like to use for a specific card. But I do find myself kind of wanting to take this out because this one is universally usable plus the 10k attack, while this one sometimes is not very usable with the part where you need to suck a same column rearguard to soul before using it. So it is personal preferences here, but I might take this card out for another specific card, mainly the Countercharge Cat for Dark State, because that is something that the deck does have issue with, so I might actually do that. But it is personal preferences. So that's it for the grade 3 lineup. Now to the grade 2 lineup. So first off, we must have Upstream Dragon. This card is like the literal combo card of the deck. Because on Generation Break, when this card attacks, this card gets 5k power, and then at the end of the battle, put this to the bottom deck to superior call a grade 1 unit to the back row rearguard. And of course, shuffle your deck. Very huge for the fact that it rewinds itself to superior call grade 1, which could actually be a booster. And one little gimmick that you can always do is literally have 2 columns of these, and then attack, superior call grade 1 with the first one on the other side, and then that one becomes a booster for this one basically. And then because you have time leap related abilities, you can time leap the grade 1 into something else. That is something that you can find with Upstream, and I have to say it is just very strong because of that, hence why this is a 4 of the deck. And then to a new card, Glimmer Breath Dragon. So on place, while you have a Chronojet Dragon crest, you can counterblast 1 to draw a card, and your Vanguard is at least grade 3 plus 5k power. And then the second skill is that on Generation Break 3 plus 10k power in the end of the battle when it attacks. So it's very nice that you can do the early game draw. That's a very upside about this. The only thing is it's another counterblast, hence why I'm only running 2 copies, but I also like it for being a big beater on its own. Unfortunately, it lost its rewind ability from the original, which I really wish it's just more rewind, but having the early game draw isn't too bad, but it is a counterblast, which is what actually leads us to a 2 copy of. It is still worth running just for the extra 10k power buff on its own as well, but you do have its uses, especially when you're needing to time leap with grade 1. In which finally we run the Gear Goat. I don't see people running this, but I actually kind of like it, especially since if you do not have the energy cyclers, this is actually a decent alternative. So first off, when this card attacks, if you have a Gear Dragon Vanguard, you can Soul Blast 1 plus 5k. Sometimes you'll use it, sometimes you won't, but the second skill is at the end about this card attack. If you have a Gear Dragon Vanguard, you can Energy Blast 3 to put this card to the bottom deck to draw a card, and then choose one of your rear guards or a card from the bind zone to put to the bottom of the deck. So this is just another way to draw, but it uses energy, hence why I kind of like to run this. I might cut this down to 2 for 1 copy of the cat, because once again, you kind of need the counterblast. But it's also why I'm running 3 of this, because this one uses energy, and this is the only card that uses energy, and is always worth time leaping into, basically. So I do say it is worth running, especially since it can be a 15k attacker on its own, at least. And so that's it for the grade 2 lineup. For the grade 1 lineup, so first off, Steam Breath Dragon. This is just, of course, just like every other stride deck where it's a stride enabler and also searches for your main grade 3 or recycles it. And then we go to Scheme Star GG. So on place, you can Soul Blast 2 to draw if you have a Chronojet Dragon Crest. But if it's in battle, plus 5k, which is actually going to be happening a lot. But it's nice that you're just getting another draw. And then Zargon, where when this card boosts a unit, that unit gets this ability where if an attack hits, you choose 2 cards from your drop zone and put it to soul, which can be attack hit pressure. And it's actually very easy to do this actually because of Upstream Dragon. Hence why I just run 2 of this, because you're just going to call this very easily. And then Time Turner Dragon Clockwise. Compared to most of the other Stride deck sets, this is actually much more usable at full power in this Stride deck set because of next stage. But anyway, on place, if your Vanguard's grade is equal or less than your opponent's Vanguard grade, Soul Charge 1 and then plus 2k. The extra soul is very helpful, but it also has the ability where at the drop zone, just like all the other ones, where you can remove it and also Energy Blast 3 if you discarded a card. Choose one of the discarded cards to put it back to your hand, which is of course going to be very helpful. So of course, just running 2 of these is pretty nice for just some tricks, especially since you will be discarding quite a bit of cards and also not using energy as well. And then finally 4 PGs because PGs. And then trigger lineup, OT, run whichever one you like, but I do like the extra crit on the Vanguard. And then 8 crits, 3 draws because you do need to draw pieces actually, especially on a deck that constantly removes its own rearguards as well. And then 4 heals, 2 being counters. And now to the G zone, because this is going to be the big part of the deck. So first off, you must run the Fate Rider Dragon. Until more G cards come out, you're going to keep this at 4 because your maximum is 16. So Fate Rider Dragon, you can counterblast 1 and then choose a face down card from your G zone face up, which will be your new G unit, aka Chronos Command. And then choose one of your rearguards and put it to the bottom of the deck, and then Superior Call 1 grade higher than that unit from your deck. And then that unit gets those 5k power for every face-up card in the G zone. So in first stride, it's going to be plus 5k, which is fine. But this is just basically a card that enables you to do a 4th attack for the deck, especially if you combine it with Upstream. Upstream, Superior Call grade 1, that grade 1 can be a booster, and then that booster becomes Time Leap back to a grade 2, which could be another Upstream if you wish, or another different card. But this is just basically your main first stride for a 4th attack, hence why you just have to play this at 4 of, at least at the moment, you just have to. And then for your finisher stride, this is Chrono Dragon next stage. So all the finisher strides all have the same condition where now you have to use that same grade 3 as your Vanguard as a stride cost. A little unfortunate that you're basically getting the Xerath Dragon cost, but it is a finisher stride, so I kind of get it, and it kind of works as a Persona thing. But next stage is that at the end of battle attack, Generation Break 2, so it has to be on second stride. You can counterblast 1, and then discard 2 cards from your hand, and then put this back to the G zone, and then restand your Vanguard. Yep, you're rewriting your Vanguard as stand, which is of course very huge because that's just a double Vanguard attack, especially on the upside in comparison to original next stage is that the original next stage requires 3 cards instead of 2 and also requires another copy in the G zone to be able to do so, while this one doesn't. So there's few ups and downs, but this is basically your finisher stride because basically it's a restanding Vanguard stride, and combining that with the Chronojet Dragon itself where it gives a guard restrict on the second attack, and also that being staying at grade 3 with your opponent, making that Time Clock Dragon even better. Because now you're at same grade with your opponent. So you might have some of those other Time Leap abilities like Upstream. So yeah, this card is just your main finisher, so there's nothing to say here. And then finally, to your new G unit, it's going to be your alternate second stride, Chronos Command Dragon. So it's the generic stride cost, so use any grade 3. And it has the ability where on Generation Break 3, you can counterblast 1 as an act to rewind all your opponent's rearguards. Yes, with 1 counterblast, you're literally rewinding all your opponent's rearguards. That is very huge because that's a mass board removal. Now, depending on the matchup, it might not work too well, but for this case as an alternative, it's actually not too bad. But it also gives one of your rearguards a skill where at the end of battle it attacked, return it back to the bottom deck and then Superior Call 1 grade higher than that unit, and then the unit gets plus 5k power for each copy of itself in the G zone. Which of course Fate Rider is going to G flip this as a first stride, and then being a second stride, you're going to have 1 copy, so you're going to give it plus 5k, which is actually pretty good. Now, if you're wondering about the rulings with Upstream, Upstream is going to combo with this, so Upstream is going to call the grade 1, while this is going to call the grade 3. It happens both at the same time. So if you guys are wondering about that, that's just how it works. And that's why Upstream is the main support card of the deck. But as a new alternate stride, pretty good. And in certain matchups, this is definitely way better than having next stage in some cases, especially on certain scenarios. Unfortunately, it cannot be a first stride, but I'll take what we got, especially for an alternate second stride that we can actually make use of. And so that's it for this deck profile on my Chrono Dragon deck. What do you guys think of it? What other cards would you recommend, and what other changes would you make? Personally, I'm already thinking about running the cat by swapping out one of the cards, and I'm only thinking about running one copy of the cat because Upstream exists. But overall, I really like the deck. Even though it's a 2-card update, they're still pretty helpful. But overall, with a new G unit. The new G unit is very huge, and it gives possible future for other Stride deck sets. But not only that, this deck itself is absurdly flexible with a lot of Dark State cards, due to the fact of how generically it runs, because you're just constantly time leaping and then superior calling, and all it does is just remove your opponent's board or just superior call more stuff in the deck, in which it could literally be anything. It doesn't even need to be like Chronojet related support, it could be just the generics, which there are plenty of generics that you could try in this deck, which is also something I really like. But other than that, there's really not much to say about it other than it's a pretty cool fun deck and a bit gimmicky as well, with cool awesome time dragons. But other than that, that's it for this, and see you all next time.